Thank you so much for joining us, Mike. I should have actually found out before. I must confess, I have not been as vigilant about you and finding out where does Michael Hussey come from. Very interesting name. If you look at your official sort of wherever your official name is on, Michael Edward Killian Hussey.
Yeah, g'day, Sanjay. Yeah, it's nice to see you, mate. Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. I've got Irish and Scottish heritage in my family, but I believe this is from the Irish side, Hussey. And then the Edward and Killeen in my middle names, they were passed down from my father. So my father's name was Edward Killeen. His father's name was Edward Killeen, so I was Michael Edward Killeen. So, but unfortunately, I haven't passed that down to my son. My wife wouldn't let me.
Yeah, and your son will thank you forever for that. Guys, don't like anything that is too long. Everything's got to be condensed and quick.
Exactly right, yes.
One of the advantages that we have as commentators is that once you quit playing, you come into the commentary circuit, we get to know you as people. But this was when I was a commentator and you were playing Champions League final in Durban, CSK beating RCB in the finals, and I think you remain unbeaten at the end, won the game. And typically I was at the ground to do a flash interview with you. And, our producer told us that we had gone into a break. And here was the star, Michael Hussey, next to me, having won a game, sweating. And they told me you'll have to wait for a couple of minutes. And it's the worst thing for me to make a player wait for television. And I said, Hussey, I'm very sorry this has happened. And I remember you saying, oh, don't worry about it, take your time. And I said, wow, that's great. Because you've just won a game, but you still understood, our problems. So that basically, told me a lot about you.
But Sanjay, what you don't understand there is I was happy to stay out with you for as long as possible, because otherwise I would have had to have gone back to the dressing room with Doug Bollinger, who would have been spraying beer and soft drink and Powerade and Gatorade all over me. So you just delayed it nicely for me. So it was quite good. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just read the whole situation wrongly. And then, of course, I remember you when you came into the commentary world for a while, did some commentary with us, and you were supposed to do an interview now as a commentator of another player. And I saw you sitting there in the corner and making notes, and it was great to see that a recently retired cricketer, big name cricketer, taking the pains to, write out all the questions, doing a bit of research of yourself. But that's you, isn't it? That's you, Michael Hussey, the person.
Yeah, well, I must admit, I do enjoy the commentary, and I find it a lot easier in the commentary box than out in the middle, without doubt. But having said that, It is quite nerve-wracking when you do have to go down there and interview a player. And I must admit, I get really nervous about forgetting what I'm going to ask or having a mind blank. So I do like to just jot down the odd notes. I'm sure as you become more experienced, it becomes more natural. But I must admit, I've had some daunting moments over there as well. I think I had to do the toss once at Bangalore in an IPL game with Virat Kohli out in the middle. I was quite nervous for that. And then I also had to interview Virat Kohli after they'd just been bowled out for about 70 in an IPL game at Kolkata. And a few of the producers said, I would not want to be you having to interview Virat after a performance like that. So it's amazing. It can get a little bit nerve-wracking in the commentary box as well.
You have so much to talk about. I'm just going to sort of take you back to your playing days. Quickly tell people, most of them know, how you rose to the rank that you did. But tell us how it all started. Your father was really your mentor to begin with. Tell us about how the graduation happened. Was it the first choice sport for you, cricket always?
Well, it's funny enough, my father, yes, he was a great mentor for both myself and my brother Dave. We've also got two sisters, younger sisters as well. But my father actually didn't like cricket at all when we were young kids. My brother Dave and I, we saw this game on TV and we said, we've just got to go out there and play it in the backyard. And we started these backyard battles. It was Australia versus the West Indies, or Australia versus England at the time, because they were the two teams Australia played most often. And we try and emulate our heroes. And certainly for me, Alan Border was my hero. I just loved the way he went about his cricket. He was tough. He was uncompromising. He played with a lot of passion and never gave his wicket away. And I just loved it. In fact, I loved him that much that I was a right-handed batsman until the age of 8 or 9. But I changed over to be a left-handed just to be like AB. And we had many great battles in the backyard, my brother and I. And probably where we learned our competitive spirit, to be honest, because if I'm also being honest, if there was a spirit of cricket in our backyard, we probably would have been banned for life. You know, there was punch-ups, there was sledging, there was swearing, there was bribery going on. So it was pretty hotly contested battles in the backyard.
It's actually interesting when you look back at things, and I'm just imagining if you didn't have a brother and you're all on your own, you know, who knows, those battles may not have started and the world would not have seen Michael Hussey, the test player or the international cricketer, the little things, you know, that changes the course of somebody's life. Sachin Tendulkar's brother taking him to the Maidan because he was being a bit too naughty and very difficult to handle at home. Little things. So if your brother wasn't there, who knows what you would have done? Maybe ended up becoming a science teacher as you were contemplating at one point of time.
Thank goodness for that, Sanjay. But no, well, my father loved athletics. And so if I didn't have a brother to play with and if I was an only child or something, he would have loved me to be a runner.
But getting into first-class cricket, was it an easy ride? Were there moments where you felt, you know, at an age of 15, 16, that what am I doing? Or it was quite a smooth ride up to first-class cricket?
No, not really, Sanjay. Okay. I was a very little kid growing up. I was a very late developer. I didn't have much power. I had no strength whatsoever. A lot of my runs came from little deflections down to third man or fine leg. I couldn't really hit the ball hard at all. And one of my first coaches just said to me, okay, you don't have the power yet. So just work on a really good basic technique, get a good defence, and then as the bowlers start getting better and more skilled, you'll be able to handle it, and then you'll grow, and hopefully we can develop some more shots from there. And it was fantastic advice from this coach that I had, because it's exactly what happened. I didn't have the power to score quickly, but I did develop a nice solid defence. And then as I grew and became stronger, then slowly things started to develop from there. So I always felt as though I was just behind everyone else because I was such a small little kid. All the way through the pathway, actually, you know, playing in the under-15s, I was the smallest kid in the team. The under-17s, I certainly hadn't gone through puberty at that stage, and everyone else was bigger and stronger. So I was known as this little dour opener that just hung in there and tried to survive and take the shine off the new ball for the better players coming in later on in the innings. So that was pretty much my childhood growing up, and even when I first started playing first-class cricket at the age of 19, I was pretty much the same. I was someone that just batted all day, didn't score very fast, didn't have a lot of shots, but it's just amazing how my game was able to develop over time.
So that's an incredible story for somebody who grew up like this and then went on to average in the 50s in test matches, 48 in one day. You have an IPL 100. You've also got a semi-final knock that everyone talks about. I remember Ramiz Raja doing commentary, and he came back completely dazed by what you did. You know, I've got that all written down. 60 of 24 balls. You needed 53 of the last 4 overs of that T20 game in the West Indies. That's a remarkable transformation.
Yeah, it was bizarre, and that day it was just I don't know. There is sometimes the stars align and everything goes your way, and that happened to be that day against Pakistan. We'd pretty much given up hope. We were never going to win, so we thought, oh, well, let's just have a swing and see what happens, and it managed to go our way. But even, I guess, starting to develop my game playing for Western Australia, I was pretty average at one-day cricket. I started off playing, opening the batting, and I was pretty average, to be honest, and I got dropped from the team. And what used to happen in the old days for Sheffield Shield cricket, you play a 4-day game, and then I was in the Sheffield Shield team. And then on the Sunday, you'd play a one-day match to finish with. Now, I wasn't in the one-day team at that stage. So I played the Sheffield Shield match. And on the last day of the Shield game, Damien Martin hurt his back and Simon Kadich got injured. So they said to me, well, we're not going to fly anyone else over. You can just play the one-day game on the Sunday. And I thought, okay, no worries. You can bat number 7. You don't have to do too much. Anyway, we were in all kinds of trouble. I think we were like 5 for 30 or 5 for 40 in this one-day game, and I come out to bat, and I managed to score 100. And it was playing in the mould of like a Michael Bevan, working the ball into the gaps, running hard between the wickets. I didn't have any big shots or anything like that. Nick and nudge and deflect here and there, and I managed to, I guess, get a good score, and we won that match. And then I think that told everyone at Western Australia, wow, maybe we can use this guy in the middle order. And it certainly gave me a lot of belief as well, thinking, wow, maybe I can play this game of one-day cricket. And it motivated me to try and improve my game and develop more shots as well.
Right, Huss, I have to now talk to you about, the great Australian team. You said you enjoyed Ricky Ponting as the captain the most. Tell us about that Australian team, and then after that, I'm going to ask you about the little dip that we saw in Australian cricket with regards to skills and ability. First, about that great Australian team, what made them great? Skills, attitude, self-confidence, what was it?
Well, probably a combination of all those things, Sanjay. I was very fortunate, I guess. I came into that team when they were well established. So for me, I think one of the key ingredients of a successful team and a team that can have sustained success is getting a group of fantastically talented players and keeping them together for a long period of time. And that Australian team at that stage, they'd been together for 10 years. They knew each other inside out. They developed really strong relationships, a lot of trust in there. They knew each other's games inside and out. They knew when someone was just battling a little bit and how to help them. And there was a great understanding of each other's games. Plus, they were, unbelievably skilled players. We're talking about some of the best players ever to play, like Ricky and obviously Glenn McGrath, Shane Warne, Adam Gilchrist. Unbelievable cricketers, So for me to come into that environment, I was pretty daunted and nervous to start with, I must admit. Now, these guys are big names, big egos, and massive team. So, but the thing that really stood out, as soon as I came into that team, they made me feel as though I deserved to be there right from the start. They said, we want you in our team, where you're part of our team. You're good enough to be here and go out there and play your way, and you can't fail. And that's exactly what Shane Warne said to me before my first test. So I think from that respect, yes, they were tough, hardened, seasoned professionals, but they also really welcomed, if you were a new player into that team, you were part of that brotherhood. And they had a lot of passion playing for that baggy green cap. I think Steve Waugh was the one that probably really built that passion and for what it actually meant to wear that baggy green cap and how hard it was to get hold of one of those, how hard you had to work, how much luck you needed to have along the way. And once you got hold of that cap, you didn't want to take that for granted one little bit. You wanted to make every single game counted, and that was the attitude of that team. That team at that stage was like, right, every game is like it's our last game we're ever going to play for Australia. We're so lucky to have this privilege and this honour. And then you put that hand in hand with the unbelievable skills that these guys had. I was just honoured, I guess, and privileged to be on the same cricket field as some of these guys. It was unbelievable. I can give you one quick story. Sure. So my we don't have
any innings starting shortly, or we've got time at our disposal. Indulge.
But this gives you a little insight about how good these guys were and how good it was to watch them from close range. So my very first test match was at the Gabba against the West Indies, and someone had gone off the field and I managed to slide into third slip. And Shane Warne was explaining to the slip cord how he was going to get out Ramnaresh Sarwan in the next over when he was bowling. And he said, right, I'm going to bowl a leg spinner on leg stump. I'm going to bowl a leg spinner on middle stump. I'm going to bowl a leg spinner on off stump. I'm going to throw one out really wide of off stump. I'm going to drag him right across the crease. And then the fifth ball, I'm going in with the backspin. I'm going to get him LBW. And I thought, wow, good plan. But if anyone knows, it's actually not that easy to bowl these leg spinners and to be able to execute the plan. So anyway, Warnie's on to bowl. Sarwan's facing. I'm in at short leg. And sure enough, first ball, perfect leg spinner, right on leg stump. Sarwan defends. I pick the ball up, throw it back to Warnie. Now, with Warnie, it's also about the show. It's about sort of the setup, I guess, before the sting. So he starts talking to Cover, and he says, Cover, I've got a feeling it's coming to you. Just come in a touch there. Yeah, I'm working on something here. Just come in ready for a catch. But then he'd walk back past the umpire and say, ball 5, LBW. Make sure you're ready. And he'd go back to his mark. Sure enough, he'd bowl the next ball, perfect leg spinner, right on middle stump. Sarwan defends. I pick the ball up and I'll throw it back to Warnie. Warnie's talking to Cover, come in a few more. It's coming to you. I can feel it. He goes back, bowls another one just on off stump. Sarwan defends again. Cover comes in and picks it up and he's like, stay there. Yep. Just around a couple. I'm telling you, it's coming to you. And he whispers to the umpire, 2 more balls. Make sure you're ready for LBW. Okay, ball 5. Sure enough, he tosses up the big wide one outside the off stump. Sarwan goes for the drive, and it was just millimetres off the turf, but short of that catching cover position. And Warnie throws his hands in the air and says, I told you it was coming to you. It's come in a couple more. I've got a feeling it's still coming. goes back past the umpire and says, "Here we go, make sure you're ready." And I'm at short leg thinking, this is unbelievable. So Warne comes in to bowl, goes for the back spinner. Of course, Sarwan's expecting something outside the off stump, looking for a drive out there. He just manages to get a little inside edge onto the pad and survives. And I just remember thinking to myself then, wow, I'm on the same field watching this absolute genius go to work and I'm able to see this from literally like 20 metres away. And that's when I remember thinking, wow, how lucky am I just to be able to witness this greatness from these players. And, that's just one example.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Because, if you tell the story to somebody, say 20 years later, whoever, and, there used to be Shane Warne and people would think, that's bullshit. But, why this story is believable? Because Sarwan didn't get out.
Yeah.
But shows the greatness of Warne. I mean, that's incredible. Maybe, the way he started off, the first ball that he bowled at the test level was to the guy that you're talking to.
Right.
So maybe
right.
It's all about starting right,
Well, what happened with that? Was it a half tracker or something, or was it?
I don't remember, but I remember hitting a boundary and he didn't have such a great start. And I think that he didn't a lot of runs. Ravi Shastri got a double 100, Tendulkar got 100. But I mean, what you've told us is just incredible. He must have been at his prime, I'm sure, with the bowling mindset and everything. So you just mentioned, while you were talking about that great team, big egos as well, because these are all great cricketers, big names. Was that ever an issue? Because I've never understood that, or maybe nobody's really explored. How were the dynamics inside? You had Matthew Hayden, a character like him, Langer, fiery, Warne the way he was, Glenn McGrath, all these people.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I would say because this group had been together for so long, they just understood each other. They just knew each other's intricacies so well, and they understood the different personalities in the team. A lot of them were great mates. You'd think of Matthew Hayden and Justin Langer, Ricky Ponting, that they were tight. That they really looked out for each other and were best of mates. But not everyone was best mates. You can't be best mates with everyone in their team. So, but everyone understood that, No, Warne would go off and do whatever Warne did, Other guys would come and go out of the team, and that was fine. But everyone had a good understanding. I would have to say, and maybe not everyone would agree with me, and particularly Warne wouldn't agree with me, but I think John Buchanan played a crucial role in this department as well. He wouldn't be able to help you, Sanjay, with your batting as much. He wouldn't be able to help Shane Warne with his bowling. He wouldn't. From a skills perspective, they had specialists to come in and do that. But as in understanding the different personalities of our team and motivating them according to their personality, I thought he was fantastic. So for example, for Matthew Hayden, he's a big guy. He loves a contest. He loves to have a good conversation and willing to argue a little bit, and I would often see Matthew Hayden and John Buchanan poking each other in the chest, having like a heated discussion. I'll be thinking, whoa, what's going on here? But John understood that's what Matthew Hayden needed to get up for a contest, to be looking for a fight almost. For me, it was completely different. I was more the calm. I needed to be planned. I needed to be well organised. So John would come to me and say, right, for training today, Huss, we've got net bowlers here. We've got a bowling machine. We've got spinners. We've got throwdowns. What else do you want? Can we get you anything else for your training? To make sure I was very systematic and needed all these sort of things in my in my preparation. He understood that, and that motivated me. There was other players in the team that needed lots of love. He just put his arm around them and cuddle them and tell them how important they were to the team. And so that's what I think his great strength was, in just knowing how to motivate the players in the team according to their personalities.
You've assessed John Buchanan beautifully, and that's the reason. There's no, nobody becomes a long-term good coach just out of luck or fluke. But Warne, why didn't he connect with John Buchanan? Why isn't he willing to give Buchanan the credit that he deserves? Because you can see what good he did. Warne and him just completely different personalities, or Warne wasn't open to being sort of mentored? What was it? Well,
again, I've got my view on this, and I'm sure there's people out there that might not necessarily agree with me, especially Shane Warne. But I think this is the genius of John Buchanan. So not quite often, sometimes John would come into a team meeting and he'd say something weird, something ridiculous, and we'd all sort of be scratching our head a bit and think, what's this guy on about here? And Warney, being Warney, of course, would say, John, that's the biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard in my life. John, this is what we need to do in this game. In fact, John, I'll show you what we need to do in this game. And Warney would go out there, he'd bowl like a genius, he'd take 5 wickets, and he'd come in and say, see, John, you don't know what you're talking about, you can't coach. And John is probably the one man that I know that has literally no ego whatsoever. Would just get his little notepad out and say, thank you, Warney. And Warney didn't actually realise that that's how he motivated Shane Warne.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. Shows that he was a very secure individual. And you get very few people, I say, we've been around a bit around the world. Very few people are there in successful positions with no egos. So it's quite a rare quality that you've just mentioned there. That's brilliant. Right. My next question that I want to ask you, because you've been around for a long time, and people like you, not geniuses like Warney, but you learn cricket the hard way, and you can then actually make a difference to the next set of cricketers, because you've learned it the hard way. Imran Khan was the same, so he was able to actually share a lot of his learnings with others. Now, this question is important to me personally as well. Batting evolution. When you started off at the first class level, batting, world cricket batting and batting now, is there something that you've seen that is in your head, exactly what is happening with the batting trend and how batting has evolved? Maybe Test cricket as one format to begin with, because when you're talking about batting, there are 3 formats of batting now. But Test cricket, have you seen some kind of distinct change happen over the years?
It's a really good question, Sanjay, and I must admit it's something I've given a lot of thought to, and I have a personal view. I feel as though the players are so much, they've got more power now, no question. They can stand there, but this is what they practice day in and day out. They don't necessarily practice the good, solid, basic technique. They can stand there and hit the ball out of the park more consistently than probably ever in the history of the game. And certainly technology has helped along the way as well. But my personal view is that I still believe that there's a place for a player as he's coming through the ranks to have a good, basic, solid technique to start with. And then I believe you can add things to your game from there and evolve your game from there. I believe it's quite difficult to go the other way. If you just start with no technique whatsoever, but have good power and can smack the ball out of the park, suddenly, when you start facing some really good quality bowlers that can move it, even in T20 cricket, you find that those players can't really survive and get through those things. And there's some great examples, even in the modern game now, of players that I believe have fantastic, basic, solid techniques and are still extremely effective T20 players. I think of Virat Kohli for one. I think of AB de Villiers for 2. There's probably a lot more that I should be able to think of on the top of my head, but there's 2 that really spring to mind. You could probably think of a few more as well. But
yeah, because I'm just wondering about Steve Smith. I mean, he's not your ideal sort of batsman, or your stereotypical good technique batsman, but there's something that he does right, because he defends well and scores of the balls that are meant to be scored off.
Well, he is a really interesting case as well, because he came into the Australian team, with a bit of an unorthodox technique. And a lot of the coaches were saying, mate, if you want to be successful at international level in Test match cricket, you can't bat like this. You can't be whipping balls from outside off stump through mid-wicket. You're going to get out. You're going to get LBW. Sure enough, he was very inconsistent at that stage while he was still learning his game. But he went away after getting dropped from the Australian team and said, well, you know what? I don't care. This is how I bat best. And he figured out his way and his method to score runs. And he said, I'm going to stick to that. That's what I know works for me. And he's come back, an unbelievable player, But there are still some good, solid basics there as well. He does have a good, solid defence when he needs to. He does allow the ball to pass and know where his off stump is, probably, arguably, better than anyone in the world. It's just that he's got this amazing ability to find the middle of the bat and score runs in different sections of the field.
Now, you've talked about the Australian team. I just wanted to know, there was that little dip in Australian cricket for a while. And I saw Australian batsmen coming through the ranks and not looking Australian at all. Australian batting stereotype was a Damon Martyn or Ricky Ponting. And then they suddenly found all these Australian batsmen, I won't mention them, looking like English batsmen with, techniques that were pretty rigid and a lot of premeditated movements. What happened there? And I must confess, as a commentator, it took me a while to get used to in Australia that wasn't as great. And I remember actually getting popped many times where a certain target was set for Australia, and I would say, Australia should be able to get it, because I've seen the great Australian side for 10, 15 years. And then it took me a while to get used to this Australian side, which is not as good. Why did that happen? That dip. And eventually it's great to see that resurgence happening again with the bowling and batting as well.
Yeah, again, it's a really good question. And I probably don't have the exact correct answer. But what I will say
think aloud.
What I will say is that the great Australian team, eventually it was going to break up. Players were going to retire. Some guys might have lost form and got out, were dropped out of the team. The next generation were going to come in. So I was still in the team when all those greats retired. There was, Gilchrist. Initially, I think it was Warne, McGrath, and Langer retired after an Ashes series. Not too long later, Matthew Hayden and Adam Gilchrist retired. So 5 of the greatest just gone. You take those out of any team, it's going to take time to rebuild. And it did take time. We had 5 new players coming into the team. New relationships need to be made. New trust needs to be built. This takes time. It doesn't happen in 5 minutes or, half a season. This takes years to develop that new culture and how we want to play our cricket. But your point about different techniques was a really interesting one. Like, we weren't exactly sure where this was coming from. It was just suddenly these players were popping up that didn't look as technically sound, but having said that, they still found ways to score runs. So I think of someone like a Phil Hughes. He looked a little unorthodox, but he knew how to score runs, and he scored a lot of hundreds for New South Wales and South Australia before coming into the Australian team. But he didn't look like your typical technically correct test match player.
Peter Hanscom, for example, as well. I mean, I'm not talking about their performances, but just interesting that how did they break away from that, mold? Yeah,
I wonder if maybe coaching changed a little bit, where the onus was put back on the player a fair bit more. Like, certainly when I was brought up, the coaching was very dictator style. This is, if you want to play, you've got to do this. You've got to do this. You've got to do this. And that certainly softened. It was a bit more of a bullying sort of culture back in those. I'm not sure what it was like in India, but this is what it was like in first-class cricket in Australia. And then that started to soften. And it was like, no, you need to take some ownership of your game. How are you? How do you want to bat? And you're encouraged to try new things, and and people, I guess, started to develop their own techniques and trying to figure out what worked for them, rather than just being told you've got to bat like this. Maybe there's some truth in that, but I'm not 100% sure.
So brilliant, Huss. It's been great. Sorry for just sort of trying to pick your brain when you should be relaxing and having some fun with your family. But thank you so much. I'm really enlightened by a lot of stuff that you've revealed today. Thank you very much.
No worries, Sanjay. It's great to see you. I'm happy to chat anytime about cricket, mate.
Thanks.